Have you ever been in the middle of working on a project and then you realize that this is not the project that you started working on at all? It's taken a totally different direction. This is something commonly called feature creep, but I like to think of it as different than that because it's more than just features creeping. The entire project can often evolve into something quite different than what you'd started out. And the reason for that is as we're working on a project, we learn all sorts of things. We get new information, we find out things that didn't work, and we have to take different directions on the project. And it can very often end up being quite far off from what the original project was designed to be. Even if it's trying to accomplish the same goal, how you actually have to implement it may have turned out to be quite different. Other times, you might actually find all kinds of new features and opportunities in the midst of that project that you didn't even know that were there. From a contractor's perspective, when we're working on a project like that for a customer, it's super important to be able to capture what those changes are if you're getting paid by a deliverable that is the project. If you're getting paid by the hour, it's not that big of a deal, although that can become a problem as well if you just charge so many more hours than anyone thought was going to be part of the project. It's common for customers to be pretty happy with the project as it's taking on a new life and bobbing and weaving with all of the changes, but they're not going to be so happy when they get all the bills and they start piling up. So either way, if you're working hourly or if you're working based on deliverables, you still need to contain this feature creep of the project. How do you do that? One way that you can do that is to just be able to go along with the changes and document them and make the customer aware of the cost increase that's happening as the cost grows throughout the project through all of the changes that are happening. The problem is that doesn't really put some boundaries on the project, and the customer can quite easily become weary of that as that drags on for a long time. One of the other ways to do that would be to really try to narrow down and try to stick to the original spec. The problem with that, though, is you don't get to take advantage of all of what you've learned during the project to make it better. So there's a tension between the engineering side of making it better and the financial side of keeping it on track financially. So it is a balance. And in a lot of sense, it's an art. I don't have a specific answer on how to do this exactly, other than you need to figure it out, and you need to figure it out with the customer, with open and honest communication. A lot of that depends on the customer and how they approach things. If you're working for a bigger company, your client that you're actually working with probably has to go get approval for additional budget. That may be difficult in some companies. So you may have to actually confine your project a little bit more to the spec that you originally had so that the cost doesn't get out of control. And that may mean making compromises on the engineering side. So that's part of the balance in that sense. On the other end, you might be working with some kind of lean startup. They might not have a lot of cash, but they want to go interesting directions. And at that point, your challenge is to try to find interesting and clever ways that you can add some features without blowing the budget too much out of proportion. Those are some of the most interesting challenges that I've found through my time as an engineer and an entrepreneur working for customers. Having the constraints of a budget can be really interesting as an aspect of the project. How do you engineer what you need to do inside of a confined set of resources? And that can be an exciting part of engineering if you just embrace that as part of the design. It can also sometimes be frustrating when you see something that you know is the right way to do it, and there just isn't the budget there to do it. But as an entrepreneur, you do have to recognize that sometimes the engineering correct solution is not the project correct solution because the budget is part of that constraint. Those are a few ways that you can think through the project and balance those competing forces of engineering perfection and budget availability to try to work through the feature creep and keep the project on track, to keep your customer happy and to keep you profitable as you're working through the project.